Well, hi, everybody, and good afternoon. Thanks for coming out to another in the Reynolds School of Journalism lecture series, sponsored by our Center for Advanced Media Studies. I'm Al Stavitsky, Dean of the school, and we're just thrilled to welcome our first Diversity Fellow in residence, Hugo Morales of Radio Bilingue, and I'll tell you a bit more about our speaker in a moment. This is a new program that brings to campus and community distinguished media professionals and scholars who will illuminate issues of equity, diversity, and inclusion in the realm of communication. In addition to this talk, our inaugural fellow has been busy for a couple of days and will be here again tomorrow, visiting classes, engaging with students, both here in the Reynolds School and through the Center for Student Cultural Diversity with a great event we had over the noon hour. He met with leaders of the local Latino community and with local Latino journalists. And tomorrow, he'll gather with our Nevada Media Alliance students to offer counsel on producing state government coverage in Spanish for our region, which is a new initiative that we have here in the school. So clearly this has been a very productive and inspiring couple of days. And Hugo, we're so thrilled to have you here. We're grateful to the supporters who made this program possible, the Charles H. Stout Foundation and the McClatchy Company Foundation, whose generosity made this fellowship happen. Our speaker, Hugo Morales, is the co-founder and executive director of Radio Bilingue, which is the national Latino public radio network. He is a Mixtec Indian from Oaxaca, Mexico, who came to the U.S. at age 9 with his farm worker family. He worked the fields himself as a child, picking plums and prunes. He picked up English on the fly, went on to graduate from Harvard College and from Harvard Law School, and was the first Latino ever to earn those dual degrees. But after that, he went back to California and struggled for years to raise funds to start a community radio station to serve the Latino community. And from that very first station, KSJV in Fresno, Hugo Morales built a system of 12 radio stations in 5 states, and their programs also serve more than 80 affiliated stations around the country, including KXNV, which is the new community radio station here in Reno. The mission of Radio Bilingue is to give voice to Latinos and other underserved communities, and in addition to building the Radio Bilingue network, Hugo and his team have helped activist groups around the country to launch their own stations. As a scholar of public media myself, I can tell you that his work in our field is legendary, and he has been honored with far more awards than we have time to mention, but notably public radio's highest honor, the Edward R. Murrow Award, and Hugo Morales is also a recipient of the MacArthur Fellowship, which is more widely known as the Genius Grants. He has served on numerous boards and is currently a trustee of the California State University System. Following his talk, we'll have time for Q&A with you. And then later, we will be posting our video of this event on our website to share, and you're welcome to spread the word to your various networks as well. So please join me in welcoming our very first Reynolds School Diversity Fellow in Residence, Hugo Morales.
Well, thank you, Dean. I'm really honored to be here, and it's been really exciting to be among you. I want to talk a little bit. This has been, how would I say, very, very historical and moving for me as well. And one of the things that made me, for the first time, actually sit down and put down some notes about when some of these stations actually went on the air, including my own. I couldn't remember some of them. So I had my staff kind of help me put together some notes. So I will be reading some of them just to be accurate on some of these stations. But first I want to have our staff play some demo. Could we play the demo?
Are you scanning through the radio? You just made the right choice. You're listening to Radio Bilingue.
Aguas con el calor.
Si trabajas al aire libre, toma medidas para prevenir una insolación.
This is a big deal, isn't it, for Imperial County, for all of California, I suppose. Juvenile Justice Men.
WIC es el programa de nutrición para mujeres, bebés y niños. El condado de Tulare tiene 9 oficinas.
Insu hugontatu ko onavali, bachi vishinjivanya, sani hugonya
You're not thinking about eating those 22 packs of sugar, are you, honey?
Why not, Mom? You drink them every day.
What are you talking about?
Comienza hoy mismo. Lleva a tu hijo a la biblioteca. No hay mejor manera de aprender que explorando juntos las maravillas de los libros.
Visita latinopopmatters.org.
We have a great listening audience, and they know their music in mariachi, oldies, tejano, salsa, cumbias, trance, and so much more. We are
Radio Bilingue.
So that's a demo of some of the programming that is run on Radio Bilingue, but to give you folks a taste of what it is that Radio Bilingue does on a 24/7 basis. So the first public radio that was devoted to the Latino community by Latinos was actually started in 1974, and I had nothing to do with it. It was in Santa Rosa, California, which is the place where actually I grew up. But I wasn't there. I was in college at the time, in 1974. And it's KBBF, that's the call letters. And it's about a 100, 200 watt station at about maybe almost 3,000 feet. And so it covers it has a range of maybe some 70 miles. So even though it's very low power, because of the height, it goes very far. And as we know, those of us that are in media, that just like TV airwaves, the FM waves travel by sight. So it's very strategically placed. And again, I had nothing to do with it, but there's one connection. These folks at KBBF in 1974 were inspired by the same person as I was to do radio, and that was my brother, Candido, who's 4 years older, who had the first Spanish language radio show in a country western station in Santa Rosa, KBRE. And he did, he did his own show alone, and he had traditional music, and he produced his own commercials and saw his own commercials, and also did his own translation of the newswire from English to Spanish on the fly. So pretty smart guy. So that's what gave me the inspiration, because when I would tune in to that show on Sundays, so would just about anybody over the age of 16 who was Latino. Usually you're a farm worker at that time if you're Latino, and hooked to that station, because people identified with it. There were public service announcements. There were announcements about events. There was also fundraising going on for a funeral fund, for a scholarship fund, for farm workers, etc. The next station came in 1979, and it was done, by the way, by Sonoma State students and local Latinos of my generation. So they were literally folks in their late teens, early 20s, who built that radio station. It essentially is not referred to that way, but it's actually a youth radio station. And then KDNA in 1979 was also went on the air in the Yakima Valley, where the apples come from, here in the United States. Again, and the licensee was this community service center. They had immigration services, legal services, food stamps, etc. So they set up a radio station because they knew there was a need for reliable information to their clientele. And then we went on the air in 1980. That's Radio Bilingue out of Fresno. And then also we had another station, a sister station in Salinas, that was also organized by local people there in Salinas. And the leader of that is named Mark Hand, who those of you that are in media will hear his name within Latino stations. But also he's now doing a lot of the buying a station and selling of stations in the public radio system. So, for example, I don't know if people keep up with that kind of stuff, but if you read Current, which is the public broadcasting periodical, you'll see some of these sales of stations or purchases. Usually it's Mark Hand who has a hand in it. So anyway, Mark's the one who led that effort, Mark Hand. And then KUVO is a station that is kind of like a hybrid, and I'm responsible for getting that construction permit. In that it was a construction permit that was about to expire. And so I got a call from a couple named Terry Clifford from Washington, say, Hugo, this station is about to go dark. It's going to lose its construction permit. Are you willing to go in and try to save it? I said, yeah, I'll go. So the local board of directors met, and essentially it was a presentation, a dual presentation. I did a presentation on how I wanted that station to be a bilingual service in Denver, and the other one was the head of Acorn, the national director and founder of Acorn. So between the two of us, it had to be one or the other, and they chose me. So that I then hired some staff, and that station began in Denver, and was still going on in Denver, Colorado. And then there's a station in El Paso that began as a product. Like I hear a lot of students here, as I've been in the classroom, wanting to know about production and getting content out. And that's how this project began in the mid 80s in El Paso, Texas. And so by around 1987, they actually got a construction permit and went on the air. And so that went on the air in 1987. And then about 1991, Samuel Orozco, who you'll hear your voice later on, a producer, got a call from one of our friends who had moved out of Fresno into Chicago and said, the Boys Club is about to go dark with their low power station. It's 100 water. Why don't you folks try to save that station and make it Radio Bilingue? So I flew into Chicago and introduced the idea to the Mexican Museum if they wanted to assume that responsibility. So they did and went on, and they had a dedicated station 24/7 to serve the barrio there. It just happened to be right in the Latino barrio there in Chicago. And then we have folks like Pecun. This is the Oregon farm worker organization who began their station, low power, I think probably around 2007 or so. And then also in Yomakali, farm workers from Florida around 2007 as well. And then you also had, I forgot one station, KRZA in the San Luis Valley in Colorado. That began in 1984. And it began by Latinas. It was a women's leadership that brought it on the air. And so what's also characteristics of Latino radio, these community radios, is this: there's a lot of financial stress that happens. In other words, it's really hard to keep that going. And I was asked that question particularly at the noon presentation I had today. So what happened is that KUBO was sold last year for about $1 million to the mainstream station. And then also the Chicago Museum, they called me up a couple of years ago and said, Hugo, you have $1 million, we have the station. I said, well, how much did I charge you for that? So they sold it $1 million to Chicago Public Radio. And then we also saw the El Paso station, again, like I started in 1986, sold for $1 million to the Religious Right. And that happened about 10 years ago. So there's a lot of stress, financial stress on the financial side. So I, as the leader of Radio Bilingue on my board, are very cognizant of that, watching the bottom line to make sure we survive and we thrive as much as possible. And then we also help other groups to start stations. So for example, last year there was a window, we call it in our field, another opportunity to file for low power radio stations. So we, knowledgeable about this matters, got a group of Mixteco farm workers in Oxnard, California, which is north of LA along the coast, to set up their own radio stations. So they're going to go on the air any day now. And then a group in the Coachella Valley, which is in Southern California, more interior to going toward Arizona. They got a construction permit. They're going to be building a station. Then there's a group in Santa Ana that we helped, a Latino group, and they're going to probably share it with another group, so be about half time. Then we helped two groups in LA proper, which is in East LA, and then also in San Fernando Valley. So we keep on growing, and then we also have, Radio Bilingue has construction, also built other stations which I have not mentioned, which in 1998 we established a station right on the U.S.-Mexican border with Mexico, and it's full power FM that serves 1 million people on the Mexican side, because Mexicali is the capital of Baja California Norte. In 1984 we set up the station in Modesto. And then we also, in 2005, we set up a station in Willits, just in Mendocino County, north part of California. And then on 2012, we again got really busy in building stations. So we built one in the year in Douglas, Arizona, another one the same year in the Alamosa in the San Luis Valley, because that station had been started by women, was turned over to the mainstream and became an NPR affiliate when they had sustainability issues after going on the air 2 years. And then we built one in Raton, New Mexico, again, 2012. Another one in Silver City in central New Mexico that same year. And then 2003, we built, 2013, we built a full power, 100,000 water in Crystal City, Texas, which is the birthplace of the nationalist Chicano political party, La Raza Party. And then in 2014, we helped a group of women in the colonias in the Rio Grande City, in the Rio Grande Valley, set up their own full power FM. And then we're about to build another station in Zapata, Texas, right on the Mexican border. In 2017, we have a construction permit. And then we have a lot of translators that we're building in the East Bay and also in California, and then all on the coast. And then also the high desert, which places like Barstow and Lancaster. So we're going to be really busy for the next 18 months building those stations. So that's like the history of that, but I just wanted to mention about these because they're notable. In about 1991, there was a rebellion, shall we say, by independent producers of television and radio all over the United States. And also people of color, because we didn't agree with the allocation of money coming out of the corporation for public broadcasting. So I became the spokesperson for that dissent and testified in Congress against the entire budget of the corporation for public broadcasting. So what happened? It got the attention of the people at CPB and obviously Congress at that time, which was democratically controlled. And so what happened out of that was that we negotiated, at least I was the leader who negotiated 2 free channels, one for Native Americans and one for Radio Bilingue. And that's how we became the National Public Radio Service. And so it really came to be around 1984. In 1995 is when we established Línea Abierta, a national talk show modeled after Talk of the Nation, which was discontinued by NPR, I believe, last year. So, and then in 1985 is when we launched the first national show, which is Noticiero Latino, which lasted 30 years. I just canceled that in this January, because of lack of funding. But that show had a daily newscast, 5-minute newscast from around the country. We had reporters like in New York, in Chicago, Mexico City, LA, San Diego, Houston, Miami, etc. So anyway, it's a big loss. So we were the only national news service in Spanish on radio. So now there's none. So anyway, so that's what a little bit of the history there of the platforms, the basic platforms, and we are devoted to issues of health, health access. We had campaigns and all these, tobacco cessation. So I see a lot of folks here smoking, a lot more than in California. But one of the things I've noticed about Nevada, education series. These are the kind of stuff that we dealt with. Now what I want to do is play a lot of radio, so that you can explain these clips. And the first one will be in Mixteco, and this is a show we began in 1991. My family was one of the first Mixteco families to immigrate to California, but now there's over 100,000 just in California. So could we have the first clip, number 1?
La hora Mixteca, buenos días.
Buenos días.
Buenos días.
Aquí quiero mandar un saludo para mi papá allá en Oaxaca.
Sí, ¿con quién tengo el gusto?
Josefina Velasco.
Josefina Velasco. ¿De dónde nos hablas?
Aquí la man.
¿A dónde van los saludos?
Oh, allá San Juan Mixtepec.
Ándele, San Juan Mixtepec, ¿eh?
Ajá.
Muy bien, muy bien.
Sani Manilu Tachu, Sani saluda no Payuti, Mayuti, Diji Kuni Tachu saluda no na Tichazo na Vichiquin Domingo.
Aña, ño, ¿dónde na?
Año, anda ya na.
Ya, tanto ni cura, cuaca, su saba, saracan, y ahora sanda, ya, anda sando, suyo, ño.
Sanda.
Ajá, con su saba.
Oh.
Con su saba, anda, ya, anda sando, suyo, ño, ahora ña, baña. Ta sani, mani, cani, sana, que eso, anda, mancha, ño, ando, suyo, ni.
Sani, vale, mira, chica, ni, saludo, chica, madera, chica, ye, prima, yo,
Magdalena, Nadia.
Magdalena Gómez.
Ajá.
Okay, so the host there is Filimon, and he speaks our language, Mixteco.
I was going to say, all of a sudden he slipped into
Right, and so did the caller. They slid from Spanish right into our native language, Mixteco. And this is being broadcast not just throughout the Radio Bilingue affiliates and also in Pecun and in Oregon and other stations, about a dozen, well, now it's like 20 stations in the U.S., but also being fed to 6 stations in Mexico. 5 in our homeland in Oaxaca, Guerrero, southern Mexico, where our homeland is, where we grew up. And then the other one is in San Quintin, Baja California. That's where a lot of like winter tomatoes come from, and there's the workers there are from Oaxaca. And so it's being broadcast there by the, there's a Native American network that is sponsored by the government. So they broadcast the show there. So this lady was sending salutations to her family on the other side of the border. So, and of course, most of our people are undocumented. So there's that stress there. And that. Could we play the next cut?
No, nomás quería mandar saludos para allá a todos los que se encuentran allá en San Agustín, Atenango.
Exacto.
Se encuentren bien allá, don Gelimón. Y quería pasar el anuncio a ver si lo puede pasar, don Gelimón.
Claro que sí.
Voy a anunciar a los muchachos que están perdidos.
Sí, de los 7 muchachos.
De los 7 muchachos.
Perfecto, sí, te dar los nombres en el aire para ver si alguien lo conoce, porque bueno, es una situación que ya hemos venido tocando ya desde hace más de un año.
Gracias. Es Miguel Elena Suárez,
sí.
Juvenal Elena Ríos, Felipe Elena Ríos, Jaime Elena Valdera, Pablo sí. Elena Zurita, Osvaldo Suárez Mesa, Mario Aguilar Rivera, y estos son don Gelimón.
Y que pues cualquier gente que sabe de su paradero, donde se encuentra, que se comunique.
Sí, don Gelimón, ojalá que alguien los tenga allá, o alguien sabe de ellos, o alguien los miró allá, o aquí de este lado, don Gelimón, no sabe.
This is the case where a caller from San Quintin, Baja California, who works for the local radio station there, the affiliate, is calling the show because they're looking for 7 lost workers. This is the reality among farm workers, because a lot of it, because being undocumented and the poverty that we face in our homeland and in Mexico. So they come here. So there's 7 young men and women who are lost, and they believe to be in the U.S. because they crossed the border, but their parents and relatives had not heard of them in over a year. And so they want to know where they are. So they're trying to use Radio Bilingue. They're trying to see if anybody knows them, to please call that radio station San Quintin. That's the names they called out. So that's one of the services and purposes of Radio Bilingue. Next cut, please.
Ahora inmigración ha decidido deportarme, pero yo tenía que presentarme hoy a las 9 de la mañana en el 10 West de la Jackson, lista con mi maleta y tomar una decisión si iba a dejar aquí a mi hijo o me lo iba a tener que llevar. Y bueno, la decisión que yo tomé, yo dije a mi iglesia que yo no me iba a ir. Primero porque yo no soy una criminal. Este gobierno me dio la oportunidad de estar frente a un juez para acusarme de criminal. ¿Por qué no me dieron la oportunidad de tener un juez de inmigración para pelear mi caso? ¿Por qué? Es lo que no puedo entender por qué. Y yo dije, no voy a irme, no voy a abandonar a mi hijo y no voy a abandonar la lucha, porque para mí es como si migración haya tomado represalias porque yo he sido todos Yo he luchado por una legalización justa para todos, no solamente por mi caso, porque yo he visto cómo mi hijo sufre y yo sé que hay millones de familias a nivel nacional que sufren lo mismo, que los niños ciudadanos están sufriendo lo mismo y es por eso que yo quise luchar y ahora, bueno, yo sé que no es fácil la decisión que tomé, pero no estoy sola, porque he estado en otros programas de radio también y estamos invitando a nuestra comunidad que llamen a senador Durbin y senador Obama y que ellos que son ciudadanos de los Estados Unidos que digan que ellos están registrados para votar y que votan y que están pidiendo que introduzcan el bill privado para ayudar a quedarme yo aquí en los Estados Unidos con mi hijo.
Tu niño, él es nacido en Estados Unidos. ¿Qué edad tiene él ahora?
Él tiene 7 años ahorita.
¿Él entiende la situación por la cual estás pasando?
Sí, él siempre ha sido bien valiente y él casi no llora, él es muy valiente y no sé, tal vez le dé vergüenza llorar, pero el día de hoy en la mañana cuando yo hice mi declaración a las 8 de la mañana, yo lo vi llorar y yo nunca lo había mirado llorar y para mí es como yo tengo que hacer algo por mi hijo y por los demás niños y no voy a permitir que sigan tratando a nuestra comunidad como si fuéramos criminales.
Ahora que estás aquí en espera de ver qué postura va a tomar inmigración en tu caso, ¿cómo te sientes? ¿Qué esperas de esto, de esta decisión que has tomado de haber aceptado?
So this is the case of Elvira Arellano. She was the first person in recent years to seek a sanctuary in a church, being an undocumented mother. This is in 2006. So we took our microphones to the church where she sought sanctuary. And so our reporters there reporting live her situation and her testimonial. And she's talking about she has a 7-year-old son who was born in the U.S. And she's in the situation of making a decision whether she's going to take her son back to Mexico, where she's being deported, or leave him here. So what happened in this situation is, in fact, she left her son here with the father, and she went back to Michoacan, and in order to have access to telephone stuff, she settled in Tijuana. And last year, when there was a lot of movement toward, how would I say, some compassion toward the immigrants, there were groups of undocumented who had been here for a long time, who essentially filed for legal status that would allow them to have a legal review. So she was one of them. So we were there also in the microphone as she crossed the border back, just last year. And now her son is 16 years old. So this is the kind of radio that we do. Could we play the next tip? Next cut, please.
Sí, ya estamos aproximadamente unas 1,000 personas.
1,000 personas.
Y hemos marchado por toda la ciudad de Castroville.
Ajá.
Y lo más importante que tenemos la guardia, la custodia de los sheriffs que han estado unidos con nosotros también.
Sí.
Tanto de patrullas como de civiles también.
1,000 gentes marchando en Castroville. No se mira todos los días. No se mira todos los días.
Eso no
jamás.
No se ve seguido.
¿Qué se prepara para el resto del día, Jesús?
Estamos pensando hacer una vigilia también para apoyo de este movimiento.
Culminará con una vigilia, ruegos y velas. Maribel Cuervo.
Sí, recordarles que también la mayor, ¿cómo se dice? La alcalde de Salinas, la señora Ana Caballero, anunció esta mañana en una conferencia de prensa que los líderes de la industria de la agricultura se están uniendo en apoyo a los inmigrantes y a los trabajadores del campo este 1 de mayo, porque es un espíritu comunitario y de unidad y se quiere honrar y dar paso a que esta industria siga desarrollándose con el apoyo, obviamente, de los inmigrantes.
Así es. Bueno, Jesús, muchísimas gracias por ese reporte desde la marcha de Castroville, California.
Ahorita vamos a ir una porra bien grande.
A ver, adelante, echa.
A ver, ahí va. ¿Qué queremos? ¿Qué queremos? ¿Qué queremos? ¿Cuándo? ¿Cuándo? ¿Ya viste, Samuel?
Hoy desde Castroville para todo el mundo, ¿eh?
La voz del inmigrante.
Allí se oyó.
Estamos de pie.
Oiga usted.
Y claro que están en la lucha.
Dinos, ¿qué presencias, Rosalba?
Increíble, aquí increíble. Llevo 2 horas en la misma esquina, aquí en Chicago, en la Jackson y la Stout, en el centro de Chicago, 2 horas y no cesan de pasar las personas.
¿Cómo comparas esto con lo del 10 de marzo?
Oh, no, muchísimos miles más de personas y todos bien animados, tienen letreros que dicen también nosotros tenemos un sueño, hoy marchamos, mañana votamos, fuera con los Minutemen, todo tipo de pancartas con sus mensajes. Está increíble, la verdad. No, nunca había visto a tanta gente participar en una manifestación.
¿Chicago hace historia otra vez?
Pues ya veremos cuando veamos el reporte final, porque supongo que ahora es la misma situación en muchas otras ciudades a lo largo del país.
Vayamos con Hugo, que nos llama desde Denver, Colorado. ¿Qué tal, Hugo? ¿Está usted al aire?
Me estoy reportando con ustedes para informarles que hoy ha sido un gran éxito la marcha aquí en la ciudad de Denver. Se calcula entre 170 a 200,000 gentes.
Hoy no más.
Y sigue llegando la marcha.
Ay, ¿oíste eso, Maribel?
Sí. Increíble, Samuel, increíble. Y
en
Denver.
Síganos contando.
Y qué bonito ver a las familias enteras con los niños. O sea, tranquilo, o sea, como un día de fiesta.
Un verdadero día de fiesta, ¿eh?
Pues realmente
¿está en marcha todavía la manifestación?
Sigue llegando gente todavía la marcha.
¿Usted dónde está?
Empezó la marcha, empezó en la 29 y la Federal, en un parquecito. Y más o menos ahorita la marcha se concentró aquí en el Capitolio, aquí en el mero Capitolio, centro de la ciudad de Denver.
Ajá.
¿Verdad? Y pues...
So this is about the marches 2006, pro-immigration marches. We had over 500,000 in Chicago, so we had that report. Then 200,000 in Denver. So we had people, listeners, calling in and reporting what was going on the ground in those marches. So that's the kind of radio that we do in reporting. And then next what we're going to see actually this video, and that's going to be about, because we partner with folks. So in this situation, we partner actually with my wife's organization, was the Alliance for California Traditional Arts. And what we did is we took our microphones for the first time to East Los Angeles, which in Boyle Heights, which has a larger concentration of Latinos outside of Latin America. And so we took them to a theater for a forum on access to higher education by Latinos. And then we had 2 hours in Spanish and 1 hour in English. KPFK in LA, which covers all Southern California, did a simulcast. So it was the first time that any public radio station had extended its microphones live into East LA in history. So we were able to be part of that, and that station really wants to partner again with us because they had never done this, and they really liked the quality of the discussion and so forth. And then, so we, Amy Kitchener, my wife, organization helped us organize this, and for a forum of local people to talk about any issue they wanted, along with, we talked about access to higher education. And so we went to a hotel, which is called the Boyle Hotel, there by a plaza called Mariachi Plaza there, and for them to talk about whatever they wanted. They did not want to be broadcast live. Being that the FCC has regulations about 4-letter words. So you'll see what they talked about, which is a surprise. So they chose the topic, which is the gentrification of East Los Angeles. I had no idea that was going to be the topic they would choose. I thought that was only happening in places like, the Mission District in San Francisco. So let's play that video.
mapped as racially segregated. That's how LA was built, and that's how it has been. So for people to come into our neighborhoods as if it's nothing is a lie. Where do our families go?
We can create those sustainable ways of improving our communities without having to gentrify.
A redevelopment comes in, like we lose out on that. And you're not talking about a family, you're talking about over 6,000 people. And if we allow that, such a massive project, then what is that going to say to the areas, around it?
El nuevo proyecto de conquista del oeste se ha llevado a cabo. Es terrible, ¿no? Cada vez que regreso de una gira, me encuentro con que mi panadería favorita ya es un Smart Café. Mi taquería favorita ya es un hipster bar.
This conversation of gentrification is bigger, and it's great that we're having it, but I think it's also these neighborhoods need to connect together and create a bigger conversation about how we change the world to be equitable and to empower the working class and empower these youth to change this world for the better and to disperse that 1% cash for everyone's pocket.
It's such a complex thing. Like, losing Boyle Heights is not just a house, it's not just land, but it's our home, right? It's our protection, it's our safe haven, right? And it's been a safe haven for immigrants for many years. And one thing that I always think about working with my youth is I always let them know, like, I'm pushing you all to go to college so you can come back to your community and make it better. But if their community is no longer there, what are they going to do?
We're reliving traumas of displacement, like me from Colombia, people from Central America. Let us represent our own communities.
Art has been a strong presence in the community of Boyle Heights for a really long time, and it's a way that we can engage in dialogue and conversation and be creative about different solutions around today, the conversation around displacement and gentrification, and how do we ensure that as our community is improving, that we continue to have spaces for everybody that's here, for our grandparents, from the children all the way up to seniors.
It's more than just a community, it's like a family, as you were saying, even with the street vendors, everybody's just a whole culture. And I feel that by allowing others to take that out it's taking away the definition of what Boyle Heights really is, and I feel like we should do something about it.
They intentionally de-invested in our communities. They wanted this, right? They wanted our communities to go as low as they can so they can come back and push us out.
I'm not really sure about gentrification, but my mom fighting for it and informing me about it, it's sad because Wyvenwood is a beautiful place. It's so green and I'm comfortable there, and I have family and friends.
What this Stout is about. It's marking the place that is yours, to remind other people that this place, however it may be perceived by those on the outside, is a place of spirit, it's a place of heart, it's a place of home. And that's what this is about. Muchas gracias.
So this is on September 17th of last year, and that was the same day that the new roster of MacArthur Awards were announced in that morning. And I had invited, by coincidence, all the Latino MacArthur Fellows in the history of the fellowship to go to Boyle Heights with me, to heighten up the dialogue around access to higher education and the issues of the community at Boyle Heights. So a dozen showed up. And so we had a forum at a local theater, Teatro 001, Theater 001, and then that dialogue that you just witnessed. So it was the kind of collaborations, the kind of radio that we do on a daily basis through our national talk show, and I've also been involved also as a community leader in Fresno and in California. For example, I was asked by a couple of foundations to lead an effort to draft this is a couple of years ago, to draft a plan for the implementation of comprehensive immigration reform in Fresno County. And so I did. I called a couple of dozen of my friends, and they all accepted. The only one that did not accept was the local bishop, but the local Catholic bishop. And so we came up with a plan for the bringing of the implementation of comprehensive immigration reform in Fresno County, being that there's very limited resources to help immigrants, period. And if there were to be comprehensive immigration reform, very few, in fact, will be able to change the status because there's not enough resources. So that's the kind of leadership that we also do outside of the microphones. And this is the kind of partnerships we do. And now, since there's no comprehensive immigration reform, the fact that there is, besides DACA, there's now the other opportunity under the executive order, we are able to use that network to be able to provide some services and have undocumented people take advantage of that. And in terms of the future, I think the future is that we'll continue doing what we can do. I think sustainability will be the primary issue. Succession. I turn 66, March 23rd, and so we have to think about that. So, and then also, not just myself, but succession to our staff. We've been able to attract an incredible, talented, and committed staff. But, we have to think about succession. And then there's the media landscape. Where's radio going to go? Well, I think, I don't know. I don't know the answer. I think it rests with the public. But I can tell you this, the radio will be around in a significant platform among Latinos for a long time. Already it is the highest listenership of radio in the U.S. is among Latinos by far. And they listen not only in their cars, but in their home and in their workplace, which is unusual for our radio listenership. So we think that, considering also the fact that most Latinos continue to be in the lower classes economically, that radio will be a particular important platform as they seek a voice in the media. So thank you. Now, questions, Ray?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
We have some time for questions. We're going to ask that you ask the questions on mic, not that we can't hear one another in here, but so that it's captured on the recording, and then when we make it available online. So if you wouldn't mind, after you raise your hand, to ask the question into the mic. So are there questions for Mr. Morales? Oh, in the back, Dr. Mitchell.
Hugo, the woman who was in Tijuana who did not see her son, how long was she separated from her son?
Well, she just got back, and I think we taped her in 2006. Oh, that's right. So I think she was there for a year. So she was deported in 2007. So, so she was there for since 2007 until last year. So that's how long she was separated from her family. And you see how, like in Fresno County, which is very typical of California, one out of every 5 children has a parent that is undocumented. And so there's a lot of families like that there. So there's about 4 million in that situation in the U.S. So it's a lot of households that are being impacted, and that's why the immigration is such a hot topic in the Latino community.
Hi, how has online and social media affected either what you do or what you envision as being possible for the things that you care about in media?
Well, I think that's very important. As we know, new media has a very important set of platforms. And so about 5 years ago, actually, we began a project in Los Angeles to do English new media out of a production center in Los Angeles, which would be in English for a demo of educated Latinos with some college education, African Americans, and Asians. So we actually had a website that we began to populate to be able to reach the demo. And we had incredible testing about that, about how, in fact, that was compatible and appealing, because African Americans, Latinos, and Asians with some college education felt that NPR and the mainstream public radio and television just did not reflect them. And they were not talking to them and not catering to them. And so we think that there's a real promise. In the end, after about 3 years, CPB, who was the main funder, defunded us because that's when the economic downturn came and a lot of budget issues, and they just felt they could not support it in the future. But that's where the future, part of the future is, in new media. And we're hopeful that the authentic voices, like you heard on Radio Bilingue, will somehow translate that, because we believe that if we, people of color, are in control of platforms like that, there's more chance of authenticity. And that's why we believe in ethnic community media, in ethnic control.
Hey, Ian. Earlier we talked about that there's more competition, per se. There's more outlets, and that makes it a little bit more difficult to raise money, to raise funds for community stations. But now we were listening to what sounds a lot like oral history that you guys have been able to record. And unfortunately, one of the things that I've noticed, at least in my community, is that oral history usually do not include Latinos in it. It's like we are anonymous in the whole oral history of Reno and Nevada. Do you think that the other stations, the competition, quote, competition, are also having this oral history being recorded in the way that you guys have been doing it? Are they concerned about being media of resistance like you guys have been doing it? And what do you think? What do you think is the direction that they are going that maybe differs or is similar to what you're doing?
Well, I think for that, I think you have to turn to some of the faculty here from the communications department to answer that, frankly. But from my point of view, because I'm in deep of it, I'm a practitioner, I'm not an academic. So from my point of view, we need to be close to the ground, to the audience that we serve. For example, somebody just asked me, one of the technicians here, the gentleman here, before he said, how are you different than NPR? Are you guys friends with them? do you like them? And I say, I like them, but they don't like me. And he says, wow, they don't like you? I think they're pretty cool. Well, they don't. And NPR, and when it comes to Latinos and people of color, it's always in the third person, them. And in Radio Bilingue, when it comes to Latinos, it's us. It's in the first person. So that's a very deep distinction when we actually make the audience feel at home and where we're communicating with. And it's their voices that are the principal voices. When you heard that reporting, you heard those voices, it's them. It's that authenticity and that camaraderie and that spirit I think comes through in those callers. Even the lady that was in the seeking sanctuary in the church, same. There's that, as opposed to a reporter from NPR going there, and it's a different. Well, first of all, the translation that would need to happen. That in itself is a huge gap. And then second is that most likely that reporter is not going to be Latino or Latina, and so there's all this separation. And lack of connection between mainstream public broadcasting and forget the commercial. So that's worse, So it's going to be, I don't know what's going to happen, but it's a real challenge for Latinos to be able to gain their voices heard in mainstream, no matter what media in the U.S. And that's what the challenge is in terms of new media, is that again, you have to refer to the faculty to actually give you the facts. But my impression is, and this I heard from the president of USC, University of Southern California, a couple years ago, is that in fact, there was a time early on with the web that was thought that these websites would be a leveling field for those disenfranchised populations and sectors to be able to develop platforms, because they'd be able to be a democratic way to have 1,000 lights and 1,000 voices and platforms come. That is not the case. There are those thousands, except that essentially the same groups who have control of, ethnic groups have control of the established media and hold that audience, are the same groups who are in control of the new media. So there's a real challenge for us. And even in the funding of the Corporation of Public Broadcasting for new media, it reflects that as well.
Kind of in that same vein, do you have any advice for any budding journalists on how to deal with topics such as marginalization and underrepresentation and oppression? How do you have any advice on how to report and how to deal with sensitively such strong issues?
I don't, except that I really don't. What I can do say is that, in my case, for example, I grew up as a farm worker, and I went on to an Ivy League school, and I was the only one Latino in my class at Harvard 72, and I realized, wow, this is a lot different than, the labor camp where I'm from, And when I was in the labor camp thinking of Harvard, I said, oh yeah, I'm going to fit in, Well, I had no idea there's no beans and tortillas and chiles over there. I had no idea what that meant to me and what it means to my people, Mexican farm workers. So then at that moment, I was a freshman. That took me not long to figure that out. I thought, and then I heard even, many students and faculty members not being able to be able to analyze what poverty is. And I was living it, and I thought, I'm going to go back and take advantage of every second to be with my family and stay with my family and my people, because I have something to contribute here. What an incredible opportunity to be able to live among my people. Wow, and I was one of the few folks that would be able to translate, that experience. So I think anybody who wants to report, like there's a gentleman named Daniel Sheehy, a folklorist who's from Bakersfield, white gentleman, and he went to UCLA, and he had aspirations along the lines, but not in journalism, but rather in arts, and he joined a mariachi, and he became a mariachero. Here's a white man playing with one of the first mariachis in the world in a university setting. This guy's incredible. He's totally bilingual. He's totally immersed, and he knows the folks. And I think a folklorist would be probably the best counselor for somebody like yourself, to be able to appreciate different people and their cultures, and to give them proper value. Wouldn't you say so?
Well said.
Okay. Other questions? My wife is a folklorist, by the way, as well. Yes?
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
When starting a station from the ground up, what have you found as your most successful fundraising techniques?
Okay. First, just to give you an idea about how resourceful I have to be sometimes, and how out of the box sometimes I am to the mainstream. The person who helped me build this station, I was, like in my 20s, was a 16-year-old high school student out of this little town called Sanger, who members of his high school thought he was kind of weird because he was always thinking numbers. But he's the one that developed the idea about in the spot where one could put an FM radio station at the highest point and run the most power. And he identified a spot that we could run 16,000 watts at 5,000 feet. So that has a radius of about maybe 120 miles. So anyway, when you're trying to be sustainable, That's what you need to think about when you're building a radio station. It's not just about the content, also is the reach. And because that's part of the sustainability, is to be able to have the maximum amount of reach. And so, so that was important, to be able to have that technology. So I try to build stations that are very, very cost effective. In other words, it's very little cost. One of the things I'm doing now, besides raising money, now trying to look at partnerships with community colleges, for example, universities, to house our studios from the different stations, because it's just so expensive to rent. You know, and certainly we can find partners. So we already found a partner at Bakersfield College, and we're looking for other partnerships. So part of it is not just raising the money, but looking for partnerships to make it less expensive. The other is in terms of fundraising. Well, you know, it gets tougher and tougher because our audience is low income for the most part. It's foundations that we count on for support. But there's more and more competition for those dollars, so it's getting harder and harder. And however, there will always be some foundation support for us because our missions so coincide. Their purpose, and that's the reason they get a break on their taxes, is to give about 5.5% of their annual, of their assets back to the community to do good in the community. So we're doing good in the community, so we think we're good candidates. But it's harder and harder.
Time for one more question.
Oh, okay, thanks. Do you have any programming that helps immigrants be educated and basically they get here and now what? Like, do you have any educational programs that basically help people get to where you are today?
You know, that's really at the core of one of our funders. And this funder is really important. His name is Ed Sam. And it's interesting how this gentleman, who's also one of Ivy League, he ended up at Princeton. But when he was like 9 or 10 years old, he spent a couple years, by coincidence, in the same town where I went to school, in Huajuapan de León, Oaxaca. So he's totally bilingual. His father was building, he's an engineer, and he was building a dam near this town. So that's how he got to Oaxaca. But anyway, so one of the things, could you repeat that question again? Just a hint.
Basically.
Oh, right. So one of his interests is adult education. One of his is adult education. So that's a real challenge for us. Okay, how are we able to get our population, because about 50% of our audience has not graduated from high school. So how do you so anyway, so our challenge is to educate our folks to value education, that's one thing, for themselves and their children, because that's very, very important. And then the other is, how do we refer them to classes? So we do, to adult education and those sort of, but it's a real hard, difficult thing. And one of the things we do is to help them advocate for themselves. We let them know that they have the power to request their local school district in California, especially in school district, to have classes for them as adults, and to use the political pressure they can have to be able to have more opportunities for English classes. I don't know if people know, but actually in the United States, there's not enough classes for immigrants that want to learn English. So as opposed to what many in the far right say, that immigrants don't want to learn English, they don't want to assimilate, the opposite is true. So that's one of the interests of one of our key funders, which is Ed Sam, and he knows that. So there's very much, and then we also encourage people to get involved in their schools, and we also encourage schools to make their schools relevant with courses that connect with the community. I mean, in other words, with the Mexican American community. And we did a radio series on education, which showed a school district in San Juan Far, which is right on the Rio Grande Valley, 35,000 students. When a superintendent in 2007 took over the district, there was an 80% dropout rate. This is part of our radio series, and now it's 8%. And this is, 90, like 100, almost 100% Latino, Mexican, 30% recent immigrant. 90% of the school kids are qualified for federally subsidized lunch. So what did he do? It's parent engagement, adult engagement. He has classes, the school has classes for adults, for the parents, to connect themselves, including like sewing. A lot of Mexicans like sewing, crochet, as you know, whatever you may think of crochet. Anyway, that's what they like, and I think we could look at folklorists or what else is there, what treasures and practices they have. So that's how they can. And he's built a school, a college for dropouts, not a continuation school, which is very typical in California public schools, where you're made to feel embarrassed that you left school, and you're the guilty one, right? But rather a college where they can feel proud to. And that coincided with Texas, 2007, having a law which pays for Texas reimburses school districts in Texas for these K through 12 school districts to teach Texans up to the age of 27. That's how that college was built. So these are the kind of policies that we're letting people know that there's opportunities and they need to organize to make that happen. Did I answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, it's very, very critical.
Well, Hugo, thank you for your commitment, your inspiration, and for being here as our first Diversity Fellow in Residence.
Well, thank you, but it's all teamwork. Believe me, I have a team of not only hundreds of volunteers, but a core of some 25 employees who make this happen. So thank you very much for the invitation and honor to be here.
And thank you. Thanks, everybody.